was only idolatry.
Okay. Yeah. What did he just say? What did he just say?
We have to like go to a different category on YouTube if we have child actors and child labor. That's not right. How about if we talk about holy idolatry?
Holy idolatry.
Only right down the there, so what can we get? You have to remember holy idolatry. You know, when you're having internet connections and the audio cuts out sometimes, it doesn't work. For sure. The fact that you have multiple routers, that's impressive. Well, that's just because I'm too cheap to buy one that'll go through the whole house, so I have to dredge it all day like that to need it to the rest of the house. You knew how to bridge the two routers. I don't know how to do it. I simply know enough to know the complexities. How's our streaming going down?
I'm still just writing the description. I need to grab the description from you. Yeah, you know. Hey, my lack of preparation constitutes an emergency on your part.
And an opportunity to chat about other stuff, like routers.
Ask me about my bald head. That'll be a good opening.
It's going to go to lead-in story, right?
The lead-in story, guys, it's so funny.
Before you go somewhere.
Alright, we're going live. We are live. Let's see. Yeah, I think we're streaming now. We are streaming. The racial dimension. So I lost my hair. I was, let's see, when I was 40. So that was, 9 years ago. Shoot, I've been bald for 9 years. Yeah. I lost it through alopecia, so it's not normal male pattern baldness. I had a pretty full head of hair. I was teasing my brothers because they had less hair than me. And I was, and then within like 2 weeks, it all fell out, It's your immune system attacks the hair follicles. But I was depressed for a little while. But it was so funny when I'd see my white friends and I'd tell them what was going on. They'd because if you have an immune disorder, this is the one to have because you lose your hair and that's it. It's and my wife likes it better. So if I grew back, I'd probably shave it. And it's very, very convenient to not have to shave it. So, but I would be with my white friends who hadn't seen me for a while, and I'd tell them this story, and it didn't matter what I said. They felt so bad for me and were sure I had cancer or something serious. And but I'd see my black friends, and they're looks good, So I just tried to test it out once, and I see, one of my black friends I haven't seen for a while, he's like, I like sweet, I like the look, it's totally positive, and I put the saddest face on I can. And I told him about, alopecia, but I told it I told it like it was cancer, and I told him, I looked like Smeagol, and I was like, and he's listening, trying to be empathetic, and at the end, he goes, sweet though. It was so funny that, it didn't matter what I said. I kind of changed his emotional reaction, and it looked really good. And it didn't matter what I said to my white friends. I kind of changed their emotional talk to her. Actually, here's a segue. So then, to something serious. So I was actually a little depressed for about 2 weeks or so, because, the new orientation, and there was other things that were going on. It's a long story, but there was other things internally that were really tough. And so when I was at kind of my peak of self-pity and really needed some encouragement, I called up Nancy Harding, who's my African-American spiritual mother or grandmother. She's 89, so she was 80 at the time, and, grew up in Oakland. I was really feeling down. So I told her the whole thing, and I'm wanting some sympathy. And she's like, wait, let me understand. Your hair fell out. That's what you're talking about? She goes, man, Tom, man, look great bald. What are you worrying about? She's like, I just got Tom. She said that to me. She's like, you're going to look great. And then she's like, I sincerely wanted her to pray for me. And she's like, you want me to pray because your hair fell out? She goes, I just got back from the hospital with so-and-so who has a real issue. She's like, I'm not going to pray for you. She want to pray for me. It was just what I needed, man. I just needed that dope slap to get out of my silliness. I'm like, I've lost my hair. I got to lie. What am I worrying about? It was exactly what I needed. It was so good.
She confronted you with your idolatry, man. Men's hair is an idol. Yeah. I've been with it for years. I was pissed off that my hair was dropping out.
Yeah, she dope slapped me, doped the idol right out of my head. Because I felt like there goes the idol. Oh, I love Nancy. Nancy's amazing. Oh. Yep.
So gosh, Ernie, this is an awesome segue.
Yeah, we're supposed to open with prayer. So, hey, someone's got to pray and open us with prayer.
Well, now we got something to pray about, don't we? Lord, thank you for getting up in our hair. Lord, we just want to bring everything. We did obsess over. We just need a dope slap to get over. Oh, God. Pray that you would show up. Pray that we wouldn't run away. Amen.
Why you brought this up?
I was going to ask about alopecia because it's such a big
Alopecia areata means a small area. That's how it started. And then it grew, and I got another piece here, and then I went 2 weeks. I looked like Schmiegel. It was all over, You really long hair. That's why I shaved it. Then it was alopecia totalis, means all the hair on your head falls out, and then alopecia universalis. All of these are just fancy words. I don't know much about it because they're not going to spend much money. Yeah. It just means baldness area, baldness total, and baldness universal. So when it's universal, all the hair on your entire body falls out. No eyebrows, no eyelashes. That was what hurt me. See, that's why when my eyelashes fell out, that's when I was in self-pity. And I called Nancy.
Wow. So I was knocking here or something Texas or hey.
Hey, yeah. Sorry, I'm supposed to let Bill in. Here you go, Bill. Yeah.
The host got chatting too much to pay attention to guests knocking on the door.
Yeah.
So I'm praying for Bill to show up when he was knocking on the door. That would have been more embarrassing.
Knock, knocking on the chat door.
So I want to go to home school today. Because I have this really knowledge and talking about racial tensions and a lot of talk about how,
Ernie, can you go
idolize through Marxism and class struggle and big government, and the right tends to idolize the founding fathers and the Bible and all this stuff. And then God, as occasionally happens, decided to make it personal. So I'm actually a little bit old school, and then as occasionally just talk about a Bible passage and get past the weird ads on the Bible Gateway site. And obviously you can see the word that people are listening to just on the screen. Let's try and do reading a verse at a time as we go down the list, starting with basically Joab is me, Ted, David, Leonard, Stephen, and Bill. So Matthew 16, I'll start with verse 21. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life. Then
Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you.
Jesus affirmed and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are stumbling block. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. And Jesus said to his disciples, Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and pick up their cross and follow me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life will find it. Right? So, it's counseling and group dynamics about a structured format for dealing with emotionally sensitive topics. Screen here, so we can see it better. Let's go to faces. So, one of the things I've been trying to do is I had a crucial conversation coming up on Monday, and I was trying to figure out what are the things that emotionally trigger me so I can deal with them ahead of time, rather than I get blindsided and say things that I may regret, or that, make the conversation less constructive than it could be. So to the point where I was kind of role-playing the conversation in my mind, and I could just imagine this person responding in a certain way that would really get to me. And it really, really worked me. The thing about the fact that the way they bugged me was I would see myself reacting in unhelpful and unhealthy ways. I would try to control the situation. I wanted to shake the person. I wanted to try and back them into a corner with logic. And all these feelings that came from just imagining this person reacting that way. And I guess they were kind of reacting in similar ways in the past. And I was just couldn't quite get past this feeling. So I was trying to grapple with it. And it made me think about this passage in Matthew. And I'm not really sure why, but the thing that it struck me was when I was reading it, and I'm trying to find a good word for it, the best one I come up with is this sense of intimate betrayal. Right? If it's someone who's hard length away from you, who betrays you, you can be angry at them for deceiving you, whatever it may be yourself being deceived. When it's someone intimate with you, that you identify with at a really strong level, then it's a different feeling. You can't push them away. And what I saw in the Matthew passage was this happening in both directions. Jesus shares this thing that he's been carrying for a long time. And finally says, guys, thank you for following me so much. But I gotta tell you, you don't know the half of it. This is where it's going. And Peter, who had given up everything, who had performed miracles, who had sat at feet, who had, taken on the Pharisees, this lump, if I call it, just going, and Peter didn't want to say, how dare you, and push Jesus away. He didn't take the easy way out, but rejected Jesus. So he took all the advice. He's like, Jesus, no, don't do this. The sobering part was that Peter, who loved Jesus, who did everything to follow Jesus, the actual, real Jesus, was subordinate to the Jesus that Peter thought he was following. And David, you were commenting how you misheard me saying holy idolatry. But in some sense, I think that's actually the most terrifying thing that I've been grappling with, is that the Jesus I think I am following is the most dangerous idol to actually following Jesus. And that's kind of where I've been stuck for the last 24 hours, so I'm just going to dump that on you and see where we go. Anyone? If not, text me and call on somebody.
I want to hear from David right now. I feel some people, you might have some questions. So David, if you have questions, that's even better.
Well, I mean, I know with me, and especially with the job search and stuff, and this doesn't go anywhere near the type of suffering and things that the disciples were facing, and that, you know, we as humans face as far as needing salvation. But even as something as like a job search, obtaining a job, I really, and probably Ernie could attest to this, with me, I really wanted and expected God to rescue me. Just a rescue, you know, rather than me growing, learning, going the harder route where, you know, I wanted someone to help me fish rather than teaching me to fish. But I find that I struggle with that a lot. And I don't know, as Ernie was talking about it, I was just wondering if maybe Peter was wanting just for them to all be rescued. I mean, I know that, you know, it's been talked about how the people back in that day, or at least this is what I've heard, you know, I was hoping that Jesus would be a political leader, right? That he'd just come in and rescue the Jews from the, you know, the Romans and set up a worldly, earthly kingdom. And, you know, that's not what he was there to do. And
they wanted to be rescued in that way. I don't know if that has any bearing on what we're talking about, but that's what comes to my mind.
Wow.
A lot of times I just want God to rescue me. Just please make this go away. Just, whatever. Just.
That puts God as an idol, a genie in a bottle.
Yeah, we have this image of God. We want him to answer to us. Isn't that the whole issue? Like, what, we want to be rescued, but he will rescue us, but he'll rescue us at his time, on his terms. And if you try to save your life, you'll lose it. But if you lose your life for his sake, you'll find it. And it's that, that idolatry, that's, we want things on our terms.
But we've been talking about avoiding pain and suffering. That's, I want to be rescued even still, like from circumstance to circumstance, from pain and suffering. Yeah, I mean, like with Ernie, when Ernie and I were doing the Swan Factory, when I joined his campaign back in 2014, I thought God was going to use that to rescue me from, the job I was at Quest Software, which, I eventually lost this year. And then, and just, somehow just automatically, like, in an instant, pump me up to greater things than I've ever done in my career, and just give me a landfall of money if it had all worked out and got big, huge kickbacks. And then all of a sudden, without planning for it or saving, I'd have instant retirement. And when God didn't do that, oh man, I had a totally not, what do you call it, language ridden conversation with God. I remember I was driving in the car at night and I was just totally testing out big time. So I was so like I had wanted that rescue, and then same with like getting a job now, trying to obtain a job now. Lots of times I've really struggled in my response because I just wanted God to rescue me. Just, here's a job.
I love what. Sorry.
I deserve a house. I deserve a car.
I love what you brought up, David, about the Jews wanting the Messiah on their own terms, and that's why they missed it. When Jesus first told them he was the Messiah, they liked it. But then when he indicated, he touched their cultural idol, like continually, and that's when they wanted to kill him. Like when he gave his first sermon, it says, "I'm the Messiah." He quotes Isaiah. Everybody knows what he's talking about. And they're like, yeah, this is great. Yeah, we like him. And then he says, Sidon, like he talks about the Elijah going to a widow outside of Jew who wasn't a Jew. He basically said, hey, I'm coming as the Messiah, but I'm the Messiah of the whole world, not just your tribe. Coming on my own terms. Immediately they flipped and they wanted to kill him. And he did the same thing with the Good Samaritan. He quoted, he tells a story that that question they asked him was a common question that you'd ask of any teacher. Like, well, how do you summarize it? So he gave him a pretty standard answer about love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. That's what other rabbis would give. And then love your neighbor as yourself. That's still pretty good. But then when he chose the story to illustrate it, he was saying, listen, he was confronting all of them on their tribalism, their racism, really. He was on their racism.
Yeah.
And the Samaritan, man, that was so in your face. He made him the hero of the story. And he says, this guy who is part of the other, who you will not listen to, who is your liberal, he's your outsider, if you're, he's from the other camp, and he's the hero of the story. And he's fulfilling the law better than you and challenging you to enough. And he has none of your credentials. Boy, they understood what he was saying because they wanted to kill him.
Just want to quickly add that first message, the Isaiah reading of the scroll in the temple, Luke 4. Yeah, so coincidentally, we just looked at that on Sunday in church. But the part that never gets preached is he took out the original wording from Isaiah where it says, we can't wait for the vengeance of the Lord to come. He threw it away and replaced it with message of peace. So that's why they tried to throw him off the cliff, because that was their number one image of God. That was their thing that got them out of bed every morning was, we can't wait for God to come back and wreak vengeance. So that was like their number one passion. That was their verses of all verses. But he said that vengeance from God. No,
that'd be interesting.
Ernie, what was the phrase? Intimate betrayal. Intimate what? Betrayal.
Yeah, betrayal.
Yeah, that's very rich. I'll think about that.
I'd be interested. I mean, I don't think he was throwing out that scripture. He was throwing out that he was reinterpreting they interpreted it wrong. You look at the context of Isaiah, and it's very redemptive. It's very universal. And the vengeance of our God.
Because they didn't throw it out, but like love your neighbor. He went 180 on the original statement in Leviticus, right? He does a lot of 180s. Every time Jesus quotes the Old Testament, go back and look. Otherwise, you're going to miss the point entirely. And 9 times out of 10, it's a 180. So it's not necessarily misinterpreting. It's like Jesus brought something new to mankind. He didn't come and die on the cross and say, those 10 commandments, try harder, people. He brought a completely new covenant.
We can talk about Ernie. This is another subject because I'm diving into the Old Testament from the ancient Near East perspective, understanding the culture and the culture of the ancient Hebrews. Jesus was this idea that the God of the Old Testament is different and Jesus is revealing himself as something different is very much a Western modern view that we read into the Old Testament. So yes, Jesus was doing 180s to his culture, which I'm very fascinated about, and maybe their interpretations, but he's bringing out what God revealed himself from the beginning. Like social justice, this modern term that we use, justice, is something that's as central to God's character as love. Like when he...
Yeah. Well, remember, Isaiah, those were his words. Those weren't God's words. Just as a starting point, right?
All right, so let me go somewhere with that one, because I think one of the things that is a tension for the modern reader, and was a tension for them then, is this tension between religion and God. And the fact of the matter is, Moses set up a religion. He set up rules and priests and offices and institutions. And God told him to do that, right? He set up a nation with boundaries and rules and customs and laws. And I have to think that God knew what he was doing when he did that. And he did that knowing that it could go bad and would go bad. And this is where this gets really hard, right? Is that the really good things that God does for us often become the most dangerous idols, right? I mean, the snake on the scepter, the temple, the priesthood, the law, right? And this is where, for me, the big attacks are easy. I can see, oh yeah, this person's judging me because I'm trying to follow God. It's the tiny cuts that trigger me, right? When, a close friend snubs me a little bit, or when I get passed over for someone who's not, I don't think is doing the right things. That's when I curse God in my heart. And my heart goes cold because I am angry at my neighbor. And it is so hard for me to recognize. And like this whole few days has really been like, intellectually I probably knew this, but it's become more painfully real to me that my resentment towards my fallen neighbor is actually a veiled indictment of God. Because I'm saying, well, I can't be joyful and peaceful because that person did this. And, it is, like, this is the thing I feel like I have to fight through if I and we are going to bring unity and reconciliation to the world. It's the small, sudden serpents in our heart that whisper, good that they got theirs, or I just can't wait for them to get theirs. And like, yes, there is a genuine, valid longing for justice. But as I'm sure all of you have known, as you face tensions with people close to you, it's like, and this is why it's so painful, right? Like, yes, I want justice, but I don't want the people I love to get hurt, but I don't want me to get hurt. And that agony is something I think Jesus himself didn't fully understand until after he went to the cross. I have this fantasy in my head that maybe, Jesus himself was a little freaked out by his rebuke of Peter. And he said, like, why did that bother me so much? Why was Satan, had an opening where he could jab me? And he processed that, which is why he was able to be gentle with Judas and feed him the bread at a far deeper and more effective betrayal. And why he was able to be so gracious to Peter after the cross. And I don't understand how this works, and I can't even say I've done it yet. But I keep thinking there's a way to go to the cross and through the cross where we die to that little shred of self that we're protecting, that will get us over this need to react from fear and enables us to respond with love. And that anything that's on this side of the cross is really just burying the problems rather than actually resolving them.
Hi.
Was Christine, the accountant from the Swan Factory, who's also our house cleaner.
Praise God.
Nice little cameo.
Hi. Sorry about that.
Bernie, so I think I heard some point either in the doc or the talk that you want to know how to do it, right? And I'll just put a straw man, you just do it, right? I don't think there's a substitute for just facing it and doing it. And assuming we understand it, so first you have to understand it. But I mean, part of religion is making excuses. So no, don't. I'm not going to point to anything religious. You just do it. It's straight from your heart.
It's I was influenced by a book called Rees Howells' Intercessor, and he talks about. Let me try to give a little bit of the story to give you context. Rees Howells was part of the Welsh revival, which was at the turn of the century, about 2 years before the Azusa Street revival. The Azusa Street revival was on the cutting edge of racial reconciliation, which I believe was actually a huge opportunity by the church. And if you look at the Azusa Street revival and study, what was happening there, just radical as far as racial reconciliation, and then also how it ended. And it was really racism was very much involved in the end of the Azusa Street revival. But going back to the Welsh revival, which was
some ways like a seed of this prior to it. It swept across Wales, just turned the place upside down, had dramatic impact. Wales before that had been under just horrible problems, particularly with alcoholism and the poverty that came with it, and the forces on the family. But in the context of that, the revival had already happened. Um, um, Reese was not the instigator of it. In fact, he had gotten saved. He was in the U.S. and then he comes back, and the revival had already started. So he's a brand new believer, but